interviewing Richard Messer about his canoe trip in 1962 down the length of the Missouri River.
I'm happy to have the interview with you.
I just ordered your book last week. Unfortunately, it hasn't arrived yet. I'm looking forward to reading it. I read a few excerpts online. It sounds really fascinating. So, where do you live now?
I live in Bowling Green, Ohio, a long ways from the Mississippi or the Missouri.
How long have you been there? How long have you lived there now?
Yeah, I came here in 1975.
Okay. Now, I understand you teach or taught at Bowling Green State University?
Yes, I retired 2002 or so.
Let me, if you don't mind me jumping right into some questions, I had a whole bunch of people email me questions they wanted me to ask you about your trip. If you don't mind,
that's cool, yeah.
Mind me.
Not at all. No.
So, what was the? Who was the person that of you and your friend Jerry? Who was the one that decided to do the trip, or came up with the initial plans to do it?
Yeah, that's a good thing to start with. This was Jerry's idea, and he was the initiator and the provider. He owned the canoe. I went with him to buy it, however. And he actually had planned to go with one of our other friends, but that person stepped out at the last minute, so I said, well, hell, he's not going to go down by himself. And nobody else came forward, so he and I, I was really kind of happy to have an adventure once it was thrust upon me.
So, did you comprehend the distance and what was to take place when Jerry approached you about it?
Hell no. I mean, who at 23 would set out on a 3,800-mile voyage and have any idea what they were going to get into? You are a riverman, and you know what you can run into in terms of weather and everything else. So, no, I had no conception. In fact, I had never been in a canoe except once before for half hour.
Oh, funny. So, when you first came up with the idea or to go along with Jerry, how much time did you have before you started the trip?
I would say about 2 months, because it was about this time of year, 1962, that we took the canoe, an 18-foot Grumman aluminum, out. That boat, by the way, is still in Jerry's garage, and a damn good boat this minute. But we took it out once to kind of try it out with the other guy that was going to go down, and he leaned over a little bit too far, and bingo, we were in the pond that we were not on it, in it.
Yeah.
And, so it was 2.5 months maybe. We left June 4th.
Okay. So, where were you living at the time in 1962?
Well, that was in Boulder, Colorado. I was born in Colorado. I'm a native Coloradan. Went to just about every educational institution they have in the state. And I had been going to school over at Greeley, and then was going to graduate school for one semester in Boulder at CU. Jerry was there.
Well. Okay, so you knew him for a while?
I'd known him back in our college days in Greeley. We had a house together with 4 or 5 other guys, and we just all really got to know each other well. I mean, they were mainly from Cheyenne, and would drive down to Greeley, which is only 45 minutes or so, and it was very thoroughly, our friendship was very thoroughly established.
Right. So, were you familiar with where the Missouri started, or at Three Forks, Montana, there? Or?
Yeah. I did a little reading. I mean, I always figured I could always, if I didn't know how to do it, I could read about how to do it.
Right.
And so I researched it, quote unquote, to some extent, and then got really enthralled with the whole notion.
Right. What was the reaction of your parents and friends when you told them what you were doing?
Well, I didn't have, like everybody had parents, but they were both dead by that time.
I see.
My dad, my mother died really early, and my dad died when I was 21. So I got used to being out on my own, doing what I pretty much wanted to do. And I had a brother and a sister. My brother was in the Air Force. I was just, aside from Gloria, I had no real family connections there close. She was my fiance at that time.
Okay. So, how long you guys got married after the trip?
Yeah, right on the heels of the trip. 6 days later.
Oh, funny. That's great. So how long were you married, or how long have you been married now?
Well, she passed away in 73.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nonetheless, we had a wonderful life together up to that point.
Did she sort of follow along by vehicle or meet up with you along the route at all during your trip?
No, she was finishing her senior year.
Okay.
In college, and she was writing, and so was Jerry's girl, and we had mail stops that we had planned out ahead of time, as you do on a long voyage like that, and his parents, Jerry's parents, were very keen on us going too. They were wonderful people, the Sanders, up there in Cheyenne, and they kind of helped us out. We got letters from our girlfriends and from his parents, and we didn't even take a mosquito bar, which was somewhat necessary.
Yeah.
Particularly in the South, so they sent that along, and things like that.
That's amazing. Let me kind of look at some of these questions here. Dave Forbes, who's did the whole Missouri River last year and is actually doing the entire Mississippi this summer, asked if there's a lot more traffic on the river, do you think, back in '62 compared to now, like barge traffic or other paddlers?
That's a good question, because there is one lock you have to go through from the Missouri side.
Mm-hmm.
The chain of rocks.
Yep.
Lock 127, right there at St. Louis, and it was full, and we were there in a canoe, and there were motorboats and barges and stuff. It was very packed. It was easy to go through, I have to say, overall, though. And we met quite a bit of traffic, but I think it increased for a number of years, and then it decreased, and now I'm not sure whether that decline continued or not, Norm.
Yeah.
I would think overall the entire river system has has more people on it. Pleasure boaters and commercial as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you always get treated well at the locks. They're always really friendly to people in smaller craft.
Now, how about the hydroelectric dams? I believe most of the dams were there in '62, except maybe the one at Big Bend, which I think was under construction when you were going through there. Can you talk?
You got it.
Can you talk a little bit about the dams, like portaging around them? Did they give you help? Did you like in Great Falls? Did someone drive you around and so forth?
Yeah, the answer is yes to each of those questions. The first dam we ran into, you come to right after you get out of Three Forks,
Right.
actually, Toston.
Yep.
And it was not what it is today. It was an irrigation dam pretty much then. And we were helped right there to get around that. But there were some crucial dams down in Great Falls where you have 5 dams.
Right.
And you hit Black Eagle first, and it's not such a problem. But at that time, especially, Anaconda Copper had all that territory, Elkhart fenced and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were pretty much forced down into the willows and the rock down along the river, and there was a good current, right after the spillway especially. And so we were lucky enough, really, to run into really helpful, kind employees of the power companies to give us a ride for the most part. We did have to portage by going down to the river, along the bank, right there at Crooked Falls. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yep. Yeah, I totally know where you mean.
Yeah, and there was a lot of car bodies to go around and all kinds of things. And Crooked Falls is interesting enough, but you've got to really watch. There are several routes, and it was rough through there. That's the only place that might be, I don't know, no more than a 200-yard portage where we had some trouble.
So basically, you paddled, up to each of the 5 dams and then portage around, which is a little different than a lot of people do recently. A lot of the paddlers will take out at Great Falls and then put in below the last dam. They'll totally skip all the water in between.
Oh, hey, you don't want to do that. Take the fun out of it. No, we kind of figured it out as we went along that this length of rope we had was really important in terms of getting up those banks that are just schist and loose rock, getting up to the road. There's usually a highway or a dirt road at that time going past there, and a road over the dam most of the time. And so you got to take your gear up, and then you can take a little bit in the canoe and haul it up hand over hand, carry it along and across the dam, and then back down, lower it carefully, and get back in the water. It's a tedious process, but you kind of learn, like you do when you're out on the water. You learn how to do it by stages and keep your gear compartmentalized and so on.
Yeah, it's, today, unfortunately, those dams are so off limits, security-wise. Golly, you can't even get close. You got to take out way before and put in way below, and they're all fenced off. And
I can well imagine.
yeah. So
The thing about security is a very double-edged sword, because the more secure you get personally and with property, freedom you have.
Totally agree. Yep. Now, what about the first big lake everybody just loves, and that's Fort Peck? What was some of your experiences on Fort Peck?
Well, Canyon Ferry was really an initiation.
Okay.
Canyon Ferry, you come into it, and you come in at that time. You came into your first dead zone
Mm-hmm.
with the trees that have no leaves, have a lot of cormorant nests and so on. Some geese maybe, but it's spooky going through those the first time you go into those groves of deadwood. And then you come out, and we were trying to shoot from point to point so we could take the straightest route,
Mm-hmm.
not going down the middle. And a storm count comes up, and I know you're familiar with how fast a storm can come up.
Oh yeah.
And it caught us about half a mile, well, maybe a mile into our crossing, and I was just amazed at how fast those waves build, and we had to paddle paddle as hard as we could, and that was where we just about lost it because we knew to keep pointed into the waves breaking, but I wasn't prepared for water in the canoe and wallowing through waves for half an hour.
Wow.
And we did make that little bay on the other side where they have kind of vacation homes now, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we camped there, but man, it was a real trial. I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Really?
I was only 43, but I thought this is the end. We haven't even got started. And we sobered up a little bit after that and took care.
So you probably filled your canoe full of water.
Yeah, it started filling up, and it became, of course, harder for Jerry, who was in the stern, to direct us. And all I could do was pry water as hard as I could from wave top to wave top, and it was difficult. But there was no stopping the bail, that's for sure.
Yeah. So that was your first initiation with the reservoir. What was your experiences on Peck?
Heck, is something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. You came up from the south, is that right? East?
The east, yeah. I stayed on the North Shore.
Uh-huh.
And point to point.
Yeah, I tell you, we had survey maps, and they were pretty good. Jerry had them in his lap back there as we paddled along. And, we would make the sand points, and sometimes we would have to traverse the lake to cut off some distance, and it's very easy to get caught out there. I got a really nice picture of it from above,
Mm-hmm.
and I always think of it as looking like a dragon.
Yeah. It does. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many days it took you to cross Peck?
Not so much, really. I think it was 5 in total.
Yeah.
But, see, we lost the canoe before we hit there.
Yeah, let's actually go back, because I was just reading an excerpt in your book where you lost the canoe within like the first week or first few weeks of the trip. Can you tell me what happened and how you got it back?
We started out on June 4th, and we lost it on the 18th. And that is such wonderful country up there, coming through that area, Gate to the Mountains and that whole area down through there. And then it gets a little difficult to negotiate, and you gotta be careful down through there. At least, well, I'm talking to you, Norm, from the viewpoint of 1962.
Right.
Everything I say, right?
Right.
So, I don't know if you know where Grand Island is. It's mentioned in a lot of books. Schultz mentions it, and 2 or 3 other people. It's a pretty good-sized island, right above the bridge where is it 87 cuts across and goes up to Malta, Montana. And so we thought, a good place to camp for the end of the day. We pulled up the canoe and took quite a bit of gear out of it because we were going to clean it up the next morning. And nice, soft, grassy, sandy area, put the tent up. And our tent was just 2 really canvas halves,
Uh-huh.
tent halves, and shelter halves is what they were. And then I woke up the next morning and started breakfast and got the fire going and everything, and went over to get some powdered milk from the canoe. The grub box was outside the canoe, but the canoe was gone, and it was misty. And we were on an island without a canoe.
Not good.
And I just, Jerry got up about the same time and said exactly the same words I said. Where in the blank is that canoe? And all we could do was kind of calm down a minute, and we did have the little axe we had, hand axe to work with, and some rope, so we made ourselves there were quickies, on that island, and we just made a raft, tied it together, took a few things, got across, and started walking through the gumbo. It had rained terribly, but not on us that night. See, what it did was rain back up in the mountains,
Yep.
like it does, and it came down all the draws
Uh-huh.
and the gullies, and lifted the river about 1.5 feet, which was enough to lift the canoe up, and the canoe said, adios.
So then what happened? So you're sitting there on this island and you don't have a canoe. You figured the whole trip was over?
You know what that mud can be like.
Oh, yeah.
Wet and you're slogging through it. I mean, that was a mess. And we kept walking and looking, thinking it's got to be here somewhere, and went on down to a ranch house down there, and they, the guy who ran that place was kind of in trouble too because the roads were out and the telephones were out, the lines were down from all the storms, and he had a toothache, so he was taking aspirin like crazy, and that's all he had, and nonetheless, they treated us really well. And gave us a ride up to a Forest Service station up there, and then they didn't have any communication powers either, so they gave us a lift over to the bridge that crosses right there.
Uh-huh.
And we met a man with his family named Lupe Luna, and he was fishing, and when we said, well, go ahead and do what you're going to do, we'll just wait. And so when he was through fishing, he gave us a ride back up into Malta, Montana, and he would have taken his boat and given us, a search down through the river, but he couldn't get to it because of the high water.
Oh.
So we finally got in touch with the game warden, and he was, frankly, he was a little suspicious suspicious about what the hell we were doing on the river, and whether we had been out after geese or what.
Yeah, right.
And but soon enough, he warmed up, and he said, "Well, I'll try to get you a plane." And we said, "We'll just search the river that way. If not, I'll get you a boat from Malton." So we ended up in a little hotel for retirees there, and I certainly will never forget that place. And then he gave us a ride. He couldn't get the plane, too much departmental expense on that, but he did give us a boat ride. He got the boat and gave us a boat ride. Hell, we went down into the Muscle Shell with the boat, and that was 75 miles. And back again, and just eagerly scanned the banks and saw nothing. No glint of silver.
Jeez.
And so we came back and we said, well, what the hell are we going to do? And we're not going to go home shamefaced and say, we lost our canoe.
Right.
No way. No way. And so we said, well, okay, we'll hitchhike out to the World's Fair. That was in '62. That was Seattle. And so the next morning we were at the laundromat getting our clothes clean and writing in the journals and getting ready to take off. And the game warden came in with his grin on his face. He said, what would you say if I told you I found your canoe? And he had found it. It had washed down the river about a mile or so.
Uh-huh.
And gone across. We looked. We knew the current was taking stuff over there, but we couldn't see it. And it was over right next to this guy's hog pen. And he pulled it out of the water, and he did try it out to see what it was like to paddle a canoe, but he turned it over. And then he saw there was a life preserver in there, and he got to thinking, geez, maybe somebody drowned. And he would have called it in sooner than the week that it took, but there were no phones.
Oh, that's it. That's interesting. So
he finally did call, when he could, and the game warden came and helped us out.
That's incredible. So your canoe was used as a hog trough for a day or two before you can.
Well, that's a apocryphal tale. I don't think he did that. He was a good old boy, and he wasn't going to do that. But sometimes we might have told people that.
That's an amazing story. So you got your boat and you continued on, and that was just before. Was that before Peck or after Peck? That was before Peck.
Correct.
And then you continued on. What was a couple people wanted me to ask you what your questions on like the difficulty of finding like potable water or accesses to towns to resupply, things like that. Did you have problems with drinking water? Did you just drink out of the river, and so forth?
Well, I didn't think about it much until I started writing this book, and I realized it's so much nicer now when you can take a plastic jug with you, full of good water, and have a good supply. Then we would boil water. Even then, I had there was a word out about Giardia,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't really believe it, but there probably was no place in Colorado or Wyoming where you could drink the water without chancing, parasites. So we would boil it, and we would try to go in with we had some plastic jugs, and we would go in and fill it up where we could. People were pretty nice about giving us water. And anybody who lived along the river, they were great people all the way up and down. Never
Right.
had any trouble, but we did get into some bad water, and one time I got sick. But other than that, no, it was always a hassle, but it's just something like it becomes normal.
Right. And how about getting food? Like, what was your typical diet? What did you guys eat every day? Did you take advantage of going into every town you came across to eat and so forth?
Not everyone. We had the mail stops. Cascade was the first decent-sized place we went into there, and we got groceries. But I noticed it wasn't very long after we got off the river that people who do a lot of biking and mountain climbing, they were catered to with all these freeze-dried foods and dehydrated stuff, and REI.
Yep.
You're familiar with that company?
Yep.
They started putting out this stuff you could take, and it became a whole different ballgame. We had to take paper bags full of groceries and whatever would stay fresh, and that generally didn't mean meat. We had our share of spam. We had our share of Kraft macaroni dinners, and more than it was 30 years before I would eat another one of those that summer. But by and large, the really big occasions were when we had a mail stop and we could go in, have a beer, get our groceries, walk back. Generally, somebody would be going to the river to fish or something and give us a ride. So it wasn't bad.
You probably had the occasional, what a lot of us call river angels, where someone will invite you to their house for dinner and a shower and so forth.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that as a thing that happens often, but yeah. People who live on the river, I guess, are, that the instinct for hospitality is kind of inbuilt. And we had some awfully kind people who invited us in and shared a meal and everything. It was a little different as we got down into the Mississippi. But we're talking mainly about the upper Missouri, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it seems like there's more people, more access along the Missouri than the Mississippi for sure.
Yeah.
So, curiosity, did you ever keep in touch with these people? Some of these people that you met through the years after your trip?
Jerry did more than I did. I was moving around a lot, and I had a family, and I was not actually the kind of gregarious person that he is, and he kept in touch with the game warden and several other people that we met on the way down. But then we met two other canoeists down in Lexington, Missouri, and they went the rest of the way with us. So there were four of us that got down to the Mississippi and went on down to St. Louis, New Orleans.
Where were these other two canoeists from? Where did they start?
Bill Shirley and
God, that name sounds familiar.
yeah, Bill and his partner. It'll come to me in a minute. I was just emailing him. We met them at Lexington, Missouri, and we just all really hit it off and decided that together. They were just going to go. They were from Pierre and that near Bismarck area.
Is that where they started?
Yeah, yeah. And they were going to go down to St. Louis, and then they decided to go on down with us to New Orleans. I don't know why I couldn't think of Harold Umber's name, but it was Harold Umber and Bill Shirley who finished up with us.
Now, where are they today? Are they still alive, and have you kept in touch with them the last 50 years?
Unfortunately, Bill passed away some time ago, but Harold is alive and well and very much the outdoorsman up in Montana and interested in boats.
Where in Montana is he at? Because I'm up in Livingston, Montana.
I know you're in Livingston, not too far from down in Wyoming, Buffalo, and I'm not sure what the town is where he is.
Do you know if he ever wrote about his trip as well?
I know that I wouldn't say for sure, but evidently not. He never mentioned it.
That's really interesting. 1962 was actually the 1 year before I was born, so I wasn't even around when you did this trip. And I just find that fascinating because that kind of was not the lifestyle of just taking off, especially in the 60s, just going off on a whim like that. Did you encounter any other canoeists on the river the whole trip, or was just those two?
We did, yeah. There was a spirit abroad in the 60s that is probably pretty unrecognizable today, except if you read the Red Bull Bulletin. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so.
These people that climb Niagara Falls and ice.
Right.
And do very daring things, not to say crazy. There's always a breed like that around. And there was the spirit then, kicked off by the popularity of Jack Kerouac's novel On the Road, of seeing America and getting out there and meeting people and finding out what this country's about. And we wanted to do it not on the highway, but on the river. And we met a couple guys actually who came down the Ohio, and they just decided to leave. They didn't even have a tent.
I'll be darned.
And they would get rides on barges and sometimes a yacht, and that's the way they came down the Ohio, and they got into the Mississippi. And then we talked to them, and we passed their canoe later up on the bank, kind of on sawhorses, and we always wondered what happened to those guys.
Yeah, that's interesting observation. So, do you think that old Jack Kerouac spirit that you just talked about was the drive that made you guys do this trip?
That had something to do with it, but as I say in the book, in the West, there's always been that thing, Wyoming, Montana, in through there, Colorado, going back in the hills and looking around, and in Wyoming, going down the river before Flaming Gorge, and Jerry got a hold of some kind of documentary, and he says when he was just a kid, 12, 13 years old, he saw it about some guys who floated the Bighorn, excuse me, and, through the canyon.
Mm-hmm.
And they were floating and doing rapids and so on, catching big trout, he says. And across a skeleton of a grizzly bear and a flintlock. And, I mean, you're 12, 13 years old. This is exciting stuff.
Oh, no kidding. I'm excited.
Yeah, and so he wanted to do that. And when he told me I wanted to do that, go out and see what we could find. And after that, he had that in mind. And you have to realize that Jerry is much more adventuresome than me, really. He ended up teaching for a year in Australia and then doing a motorcycle trip with 3 guys pretty much around the world. He ended up in Switzerland. Went through Afghanistan, Thailand. He did it for Honda. He wrote back to them a little column, and he just had a hell of an adventuresome life for about 5-6 years after the river trip.
That's incredible. That's great.
He's quite a guy, yeah. Yeah, you might want to talk to him, actually, down there in Buffalo.
Yeah, I'll definitely give him a call here at some point. I'd love to follow up with his point of view on everything.
A rock on the tour, that guy, I tell you.
So, did you guys know of anyone in '62 that had done the Missouri all the way to the Gulf?
No. And I have searched around somewhat thoroughly, and there is a book called Mississippi Madness.
Yep.
By a Brit, and he talks about going down in the 60s over a year and a half period, from Three Forks, I believe. But I don't think anybody else did it. And somebody could prove me wrong, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I do a lot of research on the river myself. I'm always curious on the history of that. I did find a husband and wife that went from Fort Benton to the Gulf of Mexico, I think in 1939. And they wrote a book, and it just came out a year or two ago. I actually have it. I got it up in Fort Benton, where they were originally from. And it had some really,
What's the name of it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I'll get back to you on that. It's
Yeah,
it has a nice picture book that comes with it, and yeah. Then I also found 2 young kids went down the Yellowstone and then hooked up to the Missouri and then went all the way to the Gulf of Mexico in 1889. And I found some old newspaper articles here in Livingston, where I live, on those 2 boys. I believe they were from Livingston here. But
good research. Yeah. Have you ever done the Yellowstone?
Not the entire thing.
I always wanted to.
Yeah. Hopefully in the next year or so we get to do that for sure.
I've got a wonderful book on the Yellowstone. I'll have to tell you the title when I email you.
Yeah. Let's see. Got a lot of other questions here. Dave Hillman wanted me to ask you, 1 year after the trip, what location or event still burned the brightest?
Well, of course, when we lost the canoe, indelible. But there are so many. I think one of the ones that is dear to my heart today is when we were with Harold and Bill, and we were down on the other side of St. Louis, down where it was really kind of jungle compared to anything in Wyoming. And we went in, out of the rain, into a bar and had a beer or two, and the bartender suddenly called out from the other end of the bar, "Is there a Jerry Sanders here?" And Jerry looked at me like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
I mean, no cell phone, no GPS, none of that stuff. So, who would be calling Jerry Sanders? And Jerry kind of reared back and said, "Well, who wants to know?" And the bartender mother.
Oh, funny.
It was his mother who had called him. She had tracked him down through a relative and knew that the mail stuff was in that town and that he was going to be, at one of these bars, and she hit it lucky. But that kind of ended our night of carousing at that point.
That's incredibly funny. So yeah, how did you guys deal with letting people know you were okay? Obviously, you didn't have a cell phone. How often did you call home and let people know you were all right?
Well, time was going along at a slower pace, literally, seems like. We'd write letters, and if we had something to say, not too often, we would call. And Jerry had a relative, and I had some relatives down below St. Louis. And they, of course, let other relatives know what was going on once we went in and had actually, I think we had about 3 nights, surely, during that 4 months. But no, it was just, they're out there somewhere on the river.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different now with the people calling or texting every 5 minutes. Letting people know where you're at.
It's really bizarre, yeah.
Yeah. What was your a lot of questions on people wanting to know about wildlife and pollution and trash, like in the lower river part? Did you?
Yeah, I love these questions. We started noticing it once we got out of Gate to the Mountains. In the Gate to the Mountains area, it was somewhat pristine. You didn't have the commercial, boat companies like you do now, rafters and so on. I think a lot of that's national forest, so they're controlled. But when we were coming through the Gate to the Mountains, we saw a mink, one carrying her kit in her mouth along the canyon wall there, and we would always see whitetail in the draws and some mule deer, and kept imagining bears, but didn't see any. And it was, the bird life was really amazing all the way through there. I was interested in watching the birds, the geese, all the way down through. I think all that stopped pretty much after we got out of Gate to the Mountains area down. Especially, the Sun River comes in at Great Falls, and it brings all that silt stuff off the plains, and the river changes color, and you start running into the rim, the trash.
Yeah.
All the trash, the car tires, the car bodies, the refuse. I don't know if it's improved. Janet Moreland has talked a lot about that, hasn't she?
Oh yeah, definitely. She, during her trip, she referenced it, and quite a few people do. I mean, it's hard to overlook, especially in the cities.
Well, I think people are conscientious more so today than they were then. I mean, this was before Earth Day and before the environmental movement, and America just had the notion, well, just throw it over there in the river, nobody will see it. And it's, I want to believe it's improving a bit. Mississippi, of course, that's a whole different story.
So did you and was ever encounter any friction between you and Jerry? And if so, how'd you guys deal with it?
Yeah, that's a serious question. When you're on a trek like that, with somebody, even your best friend who you've known for a few years, you got. We thought a little bit about it ahead of time, and we thought since we got along so well, and we're such good buddies, and had done other jaunts and so on before, we thought it wouldn't really be a problem. But it does get to be a problem. If you're having a bad day, and like we were when we were coming up against Crooked Falls, and you hurt your leg or whatever, and you blame it on you really want to blame the weather and everything else on somebody.
Right.
And you learn that you can't do that, and you can't take it out on your gear. You learn a lot of things about what to do with your moodiness as you go down into a 2-3 month trip. And by the time we met Harold and Bill, I think we'd worked a lot of things out between us. But we still had those snippy moments, and you just kind of learn to roll with it.
Never came to punches, huh?
Oh, no, that wasn't ever going to happen between us, no. Jerry was too good at being sarcastic, and I was too good at rebuttal to... if we were going to engage, it would be on the verbal level, not physically.
So you talked a little bit about resupply in towns. So you had stuff mailed to different post offices that you would go into town?
Yeah, Jerry's got every postcard he wrote from the river, and collected them. And I looked at them when I was writing the book. I've got 3,800 words pretty much of his journal in the book, and then I digested a lot of mine and quoted a lot of mine. So that was helpful material that we sent from the post offices along the way. They had general delivery. I guess they still have it. Something on where you can send something general delivery, and you can go up to the window there and get it.
They still do it, and that's exactly what I did in 2004. I pre-mailed stuff every 2 weeks to a post office, and would just go into town and pick it up, and hopefully it wasn't a Sunday or a holiday when they were closed. But that's how I sent all my food. I had 12 different food drops.
Now that's a clever idea. I like that idea. Yeah.
Sometimes it didn't work. I would show up in a town at 5:05 on a Friday when it's closed, and Monday happened to be a holiday, so I'd have to wait Saturday, Sunday, Monday until Tuesday morning to get it. But
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and some of those places you really don't want to be that long.
Yeah, exactly. Did you have a favorite town along the way? To me, the memorable places are Glasgow, Missouri, or Fort Benton, or St. Charles.
Yeah, where the Mullen Trail starts there, Fort Benton. That's an interesting area altogether, and there's so much history in terms of native peoples and the settlers and all the stuff that went down there. It's very interesting all through there. So there was Fort Benton. I liked Cascade. That was the first place we stopped. I liked Cascade. I liked Lexington for its history and everything. And Jefferson City was very interesting too. This was just when people were beginning to claim that they put up a bronze plaque and say, this is a historic site.
Right.
And, all those things are in place now. Almost everywhere you go, something happens. So the towns, by and large, that I named were interesting, but there are many little towns down along the Missouri, somewhat above Sioux City and below it to St. Louis that are, well, they kind of died when the railroad went in. They were steamboat towns, and so they became backwaters. They had flourished, and but there were towns down there, part of the Underground Railroad, that were really interesting too.
Down in the south.
Yeah, because even Missouri,
Yeah.
very interesting.
So, did you have any other than losing your boat? Did you have any bad experiences with people?
Had one, maybe. I've seen this man written about before, and there are many people who found him to be amiable and just a wonderful person. He had a boat dock down below that main bridge that goes across there at St. Louis. And after you come through the lock, and we tied up at his marina, and he and Jerry got to talking and sort of hit it off. This guy had been a yacht captain for European voyagers and so on. And he had a lot to say about his past. And he let us stay there at his dock, and he had a picture of it in the book. And we went on up into St. Louis and had some interesting times. But there was a storm when we came back one night, and of the four of us, I decided, we lost this damn thing once, we're going to lose it again. I went down to check it, and our both canoes then, and they were gone. They were off the pier. They were off the floating deck there. And I really had a moment of trepidation. I looked down, and both canoes, this is about 11 at night, were underneath a barge. You know how the prow of a barge comes way out?
Yep.
Raked over?
Yep.
And they were pushed by the current back under there, and I couldn't go along the bank, so I just took off my shoes and my shirt and went on down. I left my pants on. I wasn't going to go into Mississippi with just my shorts. And went down and grabbed the painters, the both of them, and went, swam them on back to the pier. But that was, I am thoroughly convinced that those two canoes were taken off by somebody and let loose, because they were just tied with so many triple half hitches that they weren't going to go anywhere.
Right.
Unless, I don't care how much that dock was jogging around with the storm. So there was a little incident there, and we didn't bother to confront him, the person involved. We had a little discussion and went on down. But
Yeah.
he was the only, I would say, person who, maybe there was a little professional jealousy, sort of, or rivalry. I don't know what it was, but he was the only person we met that whole way that just wasn't wonderfully hospitable and kind to us.
Yeah, I guess there's always one on a trip like that. I've heard of others getting their boats pushed in the water. The guy Keith Lynch last year that paddled from Montana all the way to Dallas, Texas. Somebody untied his boat and pushed it in the water too somewhere.
Yeah, I think today it's more so to be likely than it was then. Did that happen along the Mississippi?
I'm trying to think where. I think he.
International Waterway?
You know, I'm not sure where he was at the time. I think he was maybe on one of the reservations in the Dakotas.
Oh, he was up there. Hmm. Yeah, we came down through there and went into Wolf Point, and I don't know. We got rides, and people were sharing beers with us. We had no problems.
Yeah, Wolf Point's been known to not be a friendly town, but yeah, so that's good to hear that you didn't have any issues and people were nice.
Things changed. Yeah, Wounded Knee came along. Things shifted a little bit.
So if you don't mind me asking a few questions on your gear, like your tents and stove, you know, the technology that you had back then versus today, like what was your sleeping bags like? And you probably didn't have a dry bag. Uh,
Many times a very wet bag.
yeah. No insect.
No, yeah, I can answer that. I go over it in the book right toward the beginning because it's just something you do when you talk about a trip like this. Is go over your gear, and it's important. Some people enumerate it in detail, and I tried to name stuff we took. One mistake I made was bringing my Dutch oven along with me. As a cast iron thing, you know.
Oh yeah, very heavy.
Right, very heavy. Not a good idea. And in New Orleans, I said adios to that. Even though it was dear to my heart, it was somewhat of a sacrifice, and it was meaningful at that point. But we kept it very light. We had Jerry brought. We like I said, we had two shelter hats for a tent. And you know what shelter hats are?
Not really.
Well, they've been around since the Civil War, and you have two about 4x6 shelter hats, canvas, more or less waterproof, and you have your stakes. We didn't take any; we just used whatever branch came along, and then you put these two shelter halves together. They button together at the top, and you have two tent poles, about 3 foot. You know, they are just a foot, probably 18 inches long, and they fit into each other.
I see.
And one at the front and one at the end. And so you got yourself a little pup tent there. You got a picture of it on my website, on my Facebook site on the Big Rivers. But it served, and we could use those two shelter halves to roll up our other gear.
Mm-hmm.
And we had sleeping bags. We had air mattresses that were blow-up air mattresses. And I did have some brains. Evidently, I brought some patches and glue. And we had a grill. We did not have a stove. And later on, we got a little transistor radio down on the Mississippi. But that was about it. We had camera. Jerry brought a very nice camera, and he had all those. He had a lot of pictures, and some of them got ruined. It was the old Kodachrome 2 film, but Dig My Pics did a wonderful job of clearing up those old yellowed photos.
Oh, nice.
And I would love to have them in the book in color. They're on the Facebook page in color. And so I guess I've got about 26 pictures in the book, but they're in black and white. All right, the camera. And I brought because I didn't want to worry about buying a fishing license every other state. And he brought his the 22 rolling block 22, kind of a maybe about as long as your arm rifle,
Uh-huh.
and just a very nice little rifle and accurate. And we thought we might live off the land, but as things turned out, we really did not shoot many rabbits or anything. Didn't catch a lot of fish either. Just paddled a lot.
Yeah.
And we had a 6-bolt flashlight, and should probably go to that page in the book, but that was about it. We forgot sunblock. Not a good idea.
Yeah, someone, John Sullivan wanted me to ask you about, did you get bad sunburns? Because there's a photo of you two, and it's a black and white photo, but you guys look pretty leathery. I'm sure you had a pretty good tan by the end of summer.
Yeah, it bleached my hair blonde. I was accused of dyeing my hair, but that was not true. And we learned very quickly. We had some mosquito dope and we had hats, but we learned quickly that you needed to take a piece of cardboard, tear it into a rectangle, and fold it down the center so that it fit under your sunglasses and over your nose.
Mm-hmm.
It made you look a little strange, but it really worked, a nose shield kind of thing. And then we had, other dishcloth soap. Had a tool girl, quote unquote, that copper mesh scrubbers.
Oh, yeah.
And we had our journals, and I guess that's pretty much about it. We had tea and some cans of Dinty Moore. We used to make a lot of rice, a lot of biscuits, and we didn't take any cigarettes. Weren't big smokers to begin with, but we had our pipes and union leader. So it was very relaxing in the evening to sit back with that pipe.
Yeah, I bet. Were you guys? You probably weren't in a hurry. What was your longest day, and what time did you get up and get on the river?
Well, to this day, I don't get up that early. Try to have a job where I don't have to, but Jerry was even worse than I am. We kind of got on ourselves after a while and decided we had to get up by at least 7 and get going.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different story on the Mississippi because we had to start paddling at night. It was just too damn hot to paddle at day. And paddling at night on the Mississippi River, when you lose track of the horizon, no moon, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. We didn't do much night paddling on, as you can imagine, the Missouri. But I suppose we would go from 9:30 at pretty much the latest to, if the days got longer, probably 6, 7, 8.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long day. We did 75 miles a couple days.
That's great.
And if you can do 60 miles on a lake with the wind's always blowing upstream, although we did sail a couple times too. We learned how to make a sail out of our ponchos. No, we took ponchos. Yeah, that's right. And sailing is really fun. I think
Yeah, you can cover some miles. Definitely sailing.
yeah, and it's easy.
Yeah, give your arms a break.
No kidding. Yeah.
So, when you finished the trip, first off, how long did it take you? How many days did it take you to get to? Did you go to New Orleans or to the Gulf of Mexico?
We didn't go all the way down that last 80 miles or so. Where they start counting the miles.
Right.
We didn't go down there. We got off right around the French Quarter, and I don't know. I have to say that the Corps of Engineers docks down in that area, they were always really nice to us and always let us put up the canoe and kind of guarded the stuff and everything. And we got off at one of the Corps' piers down in there, and went on up into town and ran into a lot of Jim Crow stuff all the way through that area, but we stayed then in the French Quarter. Well, I only stayed for 3 days, but the rest of them stayed on longer.
So what was the total days? Do you remember roughly how long it took?
Oh, sorry. I would say 100. I think it's 106, 109. I did count it up. It was from June 4th to September 18th, I think. And we were off the river for 3 nights or so.
That's a pretty good effort there. That's a lot of some good days and fast current and
yeah. It got to be a little easier in a sense down in the lower Missouri because, well, Jerry called it a glorified irrigation canal. I mean, it's very much controlled,
right,
even then.
right.
And there's probably a 4 or 5 mile current in there. So it got to be easier paddling down there.
Was it easy to adjust that first year, going back into a normal life? Like, what did you do? Did you go back to school or work?
Yeah, it wasn't easy at all. Jerry, like I say, kept his some ways going, and I got married, and Gloria and I traveled a lot. We went all through the West, down to Santa Fe, and around, and we ended up in Davis, California. We knew some people there, and then went down into North Beach, San Francisco, and the money ran out. And we went back to Boulder, and I said, well, I don't want to work, so I'll just be a student for a while again. I went back and finished my MA, and then later on worked for a while, and then went back for my PhD in 71. Got it in 71.
Have you did you continue the canoeing in your life? Was that canoeing and camping? Did that still become your part?
Whenever I had the chance. I grew up on the Colorado there in Glenwood Springs, down from Aspen, and we just had such wonderful access to the mountains, and we could get on air mattresses and float down either the Roaring Fork or the Colorado, and we had a sandbar there where we could swim in the Colorado, and that's how I spent, my junior high and high school years, pretty much. And later on, I didn't have quite the time. I had a family early, and I did manage to get over to the Green, and I did it. You know Moki Mac by any chance?
Yeah, the out of Moab.
Yeah, they're going belly up this year, which I hate to hear.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, and it looked like they might get out of receivership, but Anyway, I've done that trip down to Mineral Bottom
Yep.
near Moab down
Yep.
there, and I've done some above that, and I've done the Platte. I like the North Platte River a lot, especially for fishing.
Huh.
And it depends on how much water it's got in it. But I have done a few other rivers and lakes, and here we have the Maumee, which flows into Lake Erie. And gradually through the years I've been here, I've learned to love this slow, muddy river. It's got all these limestone shells and everything you got to be careful of, but got herons, the eagles are back. It's just a beautiful river.
Yeah, I love those. Love the herons.
Yeah.
So
5 eagles in a tree, in a dead tree.
nice.
5 of them.
So, do you feel this trip was a pivotal event in your life? That it sort
I
of
believe it was.
changed
Yeah, I
the
believe it was.
caused you to go in the direction of where the rest of your life was?
Yeah, I didn't. I wanted to do everything and be everything and go everywhere when I was coming up, and Jerry was the same way. We were National Geographic readers, and we just thought the world was going to be our oyster, and we could have all this fun doing stuff. But gradually things came into focus, and I realized that having a family, for me, was, since I hadn't had one growing up, that this was important. And so I decided to get married and to sink down some roots. I still try to do whatever I can, though.
Do you have children?
I have a son and a daughter, yeah.
Did they ever do anything crazy like this?
No. Not that they told their dad.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think so. Times changed. The 60s were terrifying with Watts, and it looked like the whole damn country was going to fall apart. It was bad, and with the assassinations and so on. But today, in a peculiar way, there is a deeper level of anxiety, I think, than even back then.
Mm-hmm.
So people are looking more for security. And my kids kind of dug in and got their jobs and got situated.
So, have you since, like, over the last decade with the internet, followed a lot of other people in their river trips, like besides like Janet Moreland?
I have, yeah, and I have been really interested to read the old classics like the Severide book.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a great book.
Hey, what a book! What pictures! Yeah, and Schultz's book, Floating the Missouri.
Okay.
That's a wonderful book, and kind of a sad book in a way too. I've looked at On the Water, which is very interesting, and Eddie Harris's book.
Oh yeah, I heard he was going to do the river again this summer.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, someone on the Mississippi said that they talked to him and he was hoping to do it again.
Well, he's got quite a book there. He's a garrulous writer, and I admire what he did and the kind of stuff that he had to negotiate with people in the river. He had a hell of a trip.
There's a
Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say there's a gentleman down in Memphis who's he's on our Facebook group, Dale Sanders, and he's going to be 80 years old this summer, and he's going to start up on Lake Itasca and go all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, and he wants to do it in 80 days. to
80 days. Well, you told me about the gentleman who did it in 77 down the Missouri and Mississippi, right?
yeah, Paul Gamache just this past summer from way up, up above the Jefferson, up on the headwaters.
Yeah.
77 days. He was moving.
If you're trying for a record, that's one thing, but I wouldn't advise it to anybody. I mean, you want to relax a little bit and enjoy the stars and the water and, have a good time out there.
Yeah, I agree. Boy, this has just been fantastic, Richard. I can't get over this. I'd never heard anything about you until someone sent me this link the other day about your trip, and I'm like, oh, God, I got to get that book. That sounds phenomenal. I'm looking forward to it arriving in the mail. Maybe it's out in the box today.
Yeah, it should be 3 days from Amazon. Well, your site is a terrific site, and I don't know how I didn't come across it earlier. When I was emailing Janet Moreland and so on, but I'm really glad that I have that now to join. So I thank you, and I appreciate your getting hold of me.
Well, I appreciate it too, and I'm gonna actually, like I said, I've recorded this, and I'm just gonna let everybody else hear it. I'm sure everybody was looking forward to hearing about your trip, and I really want to track down your friend that you went with down there, and maybe even take a road trip down there and interview him this summer. He's only about 5 hours away from me.
Norm, he had some health problems.
I see.
But he's going to read in Sheridan, and I believe he read just this last few days in Buffalo, and he's got a couple of articles that have come out about him and his adventures, which are considerable. So I hope you can talk to Jerry. You could. He's in the phone book. You can just get information. You can.
Yeah. Yep.
He's on the cell phone. Yeah.
Well, listen, Richard, I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
This hour and a half has just been incredible. I've learned a lot about the river and just that time period. Like I said, I was born a year after you finished this trip, so.
Yeah, I kind of figured that from what you were saying about the trips you've made, and you got a lot of good journeys ahead of you. That's great.
So if you want to do a quick plug for your book, if you want to just say the name and the publishing and where they can find it, and hopefully that'll sell a few more books for you. So go ahead and.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. The title of the book is On the Big Rivers, from Three Forks, Montana to New Orleans, Louisiana. And it's by Richard Messer with Jerry D. Sanders. And got 26 pictures in here that were color and in black and white. Look pretty good, too. And there is a website, not a website, there's a blog site I have, richardmesser.com, and there's On the Big Rivers on Facebook, and this book is published by Genoa House Press, and it's in affiliation with Fisher King Press, who's out of Oklahoma, and they're a fantastic publishing company. So you can get it through Amazon. Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I hope everybody buys. I'm looking forward to reading this. The Missouri definitely changed the course of my life, and it still is. I got a question for you. I'm looking at I believe it's the Bowling Green State University site, and there is a thing. It's called On the Big Rivers: Trace's Voyage of Discovery. I think, did you write that? Or somebody,
I don't know.
but there's a,
I wrote up 3 blurbs. I sent you 3 of them. And sometimes, they're bandied about here and there. They describe the journey.
there's a photo though that goes along with this article. I'm wondering if it's a photo of your trip or maybe you're in like a straw hat and you got a scruffy beard. Is that you?
Yeah, that's a 23-year-old messer right
Oh my God, that's a great photo. Oh my God,
there.
that's great. Well, listen, we're gonna keep in touch. I'm so glad. I'll probably call you back at some point and fill in the blanks. But I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure I'm gonna have questions about your book once I read it too. But
I
thanks.
enjoyed talking to you, and I appreciate it. I'll be checking in your site too.
Well, great. Yeah, welcome. We're having a reunion paddle this summer down on the last 200 miles of the Missouri, starting August 1st, if you can make it.
Yeah, what's the reunion of?
It's just the people on that group. So far, there's 60 paddlers that said they're going to go, and we're going to all meet up around Columbia, Missouri, and paddle to the Arch. About an 8-day paddle, and then just be together.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I can send you more information on that too. But yeah, that'd be great if you showed up for that. I'd love that.
Well, and I've got friends too who would want to know about something like that.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
All right, great talking to
Yeah,
you. Don.
likewise. Take care.